Chase Whitlock planted himself in the doorway so she couldn't pass, and the first thing out of his mouth was a laugh, the kind men use when they've already decided the joke is going to land. Look who Marcus dragged in off the street. Behind him, two more of them, leaning on the cage, phones already up. The woman in the doorway shifted her gym bag higher on her shoulder and waited. "You lost, sweetheart?" "Yoga's the strip mall 2 doors down." She said she was the new self-defense instructor. That broke them up. Logan Pruitt actually had to set his coffee down. Preston Vandermeer looked her up and down, the limp, the way she held her right hand a little stiff, and said something low about charity hires and what it was doing to the brand. And then he said the other word, the one that made the kid sweeping the mat in the corner stop sweeping. She didn't flinch. She looked at each of the 3 of them for about a second apiece, like she was filing their faces somewhere, and then she stepped past Chase, set her bag down on the side mat, and started laying out crash pads. 41 seconds. That's how long it would take. 3 weeks from that morning to put all 3 of them on their backs in front of a camera. But before any of that, you need to know who the woman with the bag actually was, because the men in that doorway never bothered to ask. Her name was Talia Brooks, and she was 30 years old, and the job at Vanguard Fight Lab was the first thing in 4 years that hadn't required her to explain herself. She'd grown up outside Tacoma, joined the Army at 19 because the recruiter's office was air-conditioned and her house wasn't. And somewhere in the middle of all that, she turned out to be one of those rare people whose body simply understood violence the way other people understand music, the Army noticed. By 26, she was a master trainer in the combatives program, and one of a handful of women cleared to run instruction for a special forces group out of Fort Campbell, teaching men twice her size how to end a fight before it started. She wasn't supposed to be good at it. She was very good at it. Then Jari District happened, and the lead truck in her convoy went up, and Talia went into the fire after the men trapped in it because the alternative was standing there listening to them. She pulled 3 out. 2 of them are still walking around because of it. The fire took some of the nerve in her right hand and a piece of her hip that never set quite right, which is why she limps when she's tired and why she can't fully close that fist anymore, which a stranger reads as weakness, and which is, if you knew, the exact opposite. The Army gave her a silver star and a Purple Heart and a medical separation in that order, and then the paperwork swallowed her for 4 years, the way paperwork does. She'd taken a 1-bedroom in Tacoma with a footlocker at the end of the bed. The metal lived in the footlocker, face down, because face up had asked her questions she didn't have the breath to answer. She did 3 interviews that year. 3 no's. One landlord who saw the scar tissue on her forearm and suddenly remembered the unit was promised to someone else. So when Marcus Doyle, who owned Vanguard, called and asked if she'd run a women's self-defense program 2 nights a week, survivors, women who go rigid when a man stands too close, she said yes before he finished the sentence. One condition, she told him, nobody hears what I did before. Marcus, who was 60 and tired and watching his gym slide downhill, agreed without really listening. What she didn't tell him was that she needed the work more than the money. The teaching was the only thing that made the quiet in her apartment feel like rest instead of a sentence. Her first student was already waiting that first evening, an hour early. Gloria Mendez, 54, wearing long sleeves in August over bruises that were healing the wrong colors. Gloria had left her husband 11 months back and still slept with the bedroom door braced. She'd emailed Talia 1 line before the class even started. "I just want to stop being afraid of my own kitchen." Talia walked over, crouched down so they were eye to eye, and put her good hand on Gloria's shoulder for a second. No words, and Gloria let out a breath that sounded like it had been stuck in her chest since spring. Across the room, Chase watched that happen and nudged Logan, and Logan lifted his phone. None of them knew that a 19-year-old named Hannah Yee was finishing her morning class in the next room, that in 6 days Chase Whitlock would wrench her elbow past where elbows go and call it an accident, and that the woman crouched on the side mat would be the only adult in the building who treated it like the crime it was. That was day 1. It got worse fast. The first week, Chase made it a routine. He'd walk a sponsor or a guest along the rail at 6, right when Talia's women filed in holding water bottles like shields, and he'd raise his voice. And down here's our little community wellness thing. Therapy mat. We like to give back. He waited until she bent to set a pad, then kicked it so it skidded into her shin. Whoops, you good, sweetheart? That's not real training, you know that, right? Gloria made a small frightened sound. Talia didn't react to Chase at all. She walked over, picked the pad up, set it back exactly where it had been, and turned to her 8 women. Tonight, we learned the wrist release, she said, her voice flat and even, because the first thing a bad man does is grab you, and the first thing you're going to do is leave. The guests had stopped smiling. Logan filmed all of it and posted it that night with a caption about the new charity instructor getting welcomed properly. 19,000 views by morning. What Chase had actually done was leave a trail in front of a sponsor and 8 witnesses, and Talia was already counting it. By the second week, Preston joined in. He came through with 2 private clients to show off the place, and stopped dead when Talia's right sleeve rode up over the burn scar. Christ, look at the arm on her. He grinned at his clients. Boyfriend finally loses temper? That's what we're handing instructor patches to now. Ruth Castellano, 51, 12 years Coast Guard before she got out, stood straight up off the mat. You don't talk to her like that. Talia put a hand on Ruth's shoulder, pressed once. Sit, I've got it, and turned to Preston. She didn't step closer. She didn't raise the rough, flat voice. She just rolled the sleeve back down, slow, deliberate, and held his eyes until the grin slid off his face on its own. Then she went back to the lesson. Watch the hips, not the hand. After class, Gloria stayed to fold mats, and her own hands were shaking. He sounded just like Daniel, she said, meaning the husband. Talia sat down on the mat next to her and didn't say anything, just stayed there breathing in and out until Gloria's shoulders came back down from around her ears. What Chase saw, watching from across the gym, was the thing he couldn't stand. A woman who didn't break and who didn't need him. His whole career was built on people needing him. He'd been Vanguard's golden boy for 6 years, his face on every column, and lately, a newer gym across town had quietly pulled away half his roster, and he hadn't told a soul. People who were bleeding out start to bite. He called Logan that night. Everything she does on camera, we're going to make her famous. The 3rd week, the wall went up. Talia came in early on a Friday and heard the 3 of them at the protein bar before they heard her. Diversity contract, Chase was saying. City makes Marcus hit a quota or he loses the youth grant. That's the only reason there's a mute charity case running aerobics in my gym. Logan laughed. Preston added that the place used to have standards, back before they were babysitting battered housewives. Talia was standing in the doorway by then. Logan saw her first and went white. Chase turned, saw her, and didn't blink. He lifted his shake in a slow, mocking little toast. Morning instructor, eavesdropping's a bad look. She walked past without a word, set her bag down on the side mat, and sat on a crash pad in the empty gym for 30 full seconds, and her ruined right hand closed as far as it could into a fist. Knuckles bleached, and that was the only time in 23 days her body let anything show. Then she opened the hand and stood up and set out cones. But that night, alone, she opened the footlocker for the first time in 11 months. She looked at the metal. She looked at the discharge papers. She looked at the photograph of 3 men with smoke behind them, all of them still alive. Then she closed the box. Not yet. Soon. I want to stop here for a second, because if you're feeling what most people feel about now, you're already doing the math on what these 3 deserve. Hold that thought. We're going to come back to it. Saturday was Chase's 29th birthday. Open bar up on the mezzanine. Music too loud, 50 people, half of them lit. Talia had finished her last class at 9 and was almost out the door when a student called about a wallet left on the mat. She went back for it. That's when Chase, Preston, Logan, and 4 of the late-night fight team guys came down the stairs looking for something to do with all that liquor, and Preston spotted her. Hey, night class janitor stayed late. They spread out into a loose circle around her, not touching, just covering the exit. Logan lifted his phone and hit the button that said live. Here's the deal, Chase said, weaving a little. Show us one technique. Just one. Then you can go. One of the fight team guys slow clapped. Preston faked a punch at her face and pulled it an inch short. She didn't blink. Her resting heart rate in that circle was 62. She'd been in 3 firefights in a country these men couldn't find on a map, and she knew the difference between drunk men with a camera and men who would actually swing. And these were the first kind, so she let them have their 4 minutes. She stood in the middle of the circle with her face like poured concrete, and she counted. The witnesses, the camera angles, the exact spot Logan's phone was pointed. She memorized the fight teen kid's face. Then Marcus came down the stairs, saw the circle, saw the live feed, and his color changed. Everybody upstairs. Now. The circle broke. Talia walked out without looking at any of them, sat in her car in the dark with her hands on the wheel, and made a call she'd been saving for 4 years to a name she kept in her phone for exactly this. Vera, it's time. Vera Lindquist, who did veterans' rights work and had been waiting on this call longer than Talia knew, was quiet a beat. Then, okay, don't start anything. Don't say one word more than you have to. And Monday, you start wearing the body cam under your patch. We're going to give them all the rope they want. Talia closed her eyes. Understood. Up on the mezzanine, Chase was toasting himself, certain he'd won something, with no idea he just walked into a trap built by someone who used to teach predators for a living. The body cam came in the mail Tuesday. She clipped it under the instructor patch, tested the angle, and walked into Vanguard carrying a bag that now recorded everything. Hannah Yee came in 5 minutes behind her with her right arm in a sling and made it as far as the doorway before her legs quit, and she sat down on the floor and started to cry. Talia was on her knees beside her in 3 seconds. It came out in pieces. Chase had been running her hard in the morning advance class. She asked him to ease off. He didn't. She felt the elbow pop. He laughed, looked at the camera, and Logan posted it. 15 seconds of a 19-year-old screaming, with Chase grinning over her and a caption about a college kid who thought she could run with the big dogs. 300,000 views. My parents can't afford a lawyer, Hannah whispered. Marcus called it an accident. If I report him to the league, I lose my scholarship, I lose my housing, I lose everything. Something moved in Talia's face that wasn't anger, that was older and colder than anger. She picked up the dry erase marker off the cart, wrote 4 words, and turned the board around. You are not alone. Hannah read it and looked up, and Talia held her eyes. I've got people. As of tonight, so do you. That night, she texted Vera one line. Bring the cameras. Saturday's the day. Saturday was showcase night, the biggest filmed event Vanguard ran all year. 200 people on the mezzanine and along the rails, sponsors, a guy from the local paper. 3 cameras on tripods aimed at the floor. Chase had been promoting it for 6 weeks. It was supposed to be his crown. Fresh black gi, sponsor patches on every panel. Preston sat front row in a tracksuit that cost more than Gloria's car. Logan roamed with his stream, open to 41,000 people. Talia was over on the side mat, setting out cones for the 3 o'clock women's class. Sleeves down, body cam rolling under the patch at full resolution, and Chase had no idea it existed. In row 3, Vera Lindquist sat with a briefcase at her feet and a notarized timeline ready and the body cam feed playing quietly on the tablet in her lap. Hannah sat beside her, sling on, white-knuckled. Gloria and Ruth and 6 other women filled the row behind them, her people, in position, on the record. Chase grabbed the mic. Before we start, special guest demo. Let's get our newest instructor up here. Come on, Talia, show everybody what the night class teaches. The crowd turned. The cameras swung. She didn't move. Come on, sweetheart. Charity round. 1 technique. Come on, sweetheart. Charity round. 1 technique. Don't be shy. She said, no thank you, voice rough but carrying. The crowd murmured, and that was the wrong sound for Chase. That was the sound of a room he didn't fully own anymore. His smile went thin. He stepped off the platform, crossed the main mat, stopped 2 feet from her. I wasn't asking. His hand shot out and clamped down on her bad right wrist, hard, and he yanked her 2 steps onto the main mat in front of every camera in the building. That was the moment the law handed her the rest. What happened next took 41 seconds, and people would replay it more times than anyone could count. Her hips turned, maybe 3 inches. Her foot reaped his out from under him. An old throw, the oldest, and his own grip on her wrist became the lever that put him flat on his back with a sound like a dropped sandbag. A woman 2 rows up gasped. Logan came in from the side, swinging his phone hand back and a clumsy fist forward, and she slipped under it like water. 2 steps, and she was behind him, with her forearm threaded under his chin. And 6 seconds after that, Logan was slapping the mat with both palms, his phone skittering across the floor, still streaming, pointed up at the ceiling lights and at his own face going the color of a bruise. 41,000 people had the angle. Preston charged with a wild kick at her head, and she caught the leg out of the air the way you catch a grocery bag that's slipping, stepped, dropped, and locked it. Slow, controlled, no crank, just held it and waited until he screamed once and slapped the mat, and she let go the instant he did. He curled up on the floor in the expensive tracksuit. Then Chase was back on his feet, face the color of a stop sign, gi twisted around his ribs, and he came in throwing everything he had ever lied about. And she slipped inside it, caught the wrist, turned her hips, and folded him into a shoulder lock that took his arm to the exact edge of what an arm will do and stopped there. He screamed it 3 times so the upper deck cameras caught it clean from 40 feet. I tap, I tap, I tap, I tap. She let go. She stood up. She stepped back, 3 of them on the mat, one being sick, one curled around his knee, one sobbing into his sleeve. She found Hannah at the rail with her good hand over her mouth and gave her one small nod. And then she walked off the main mat, picked up her cone bag, and went back to the side mat to finish setting up her 3 o'clock class. The gym was silent for 4 full seconds before it came apart. By that night, the clip was on 11 platforms. By midnight, it had 8 million views and a hashtag trending in 17 countries, and every sports page had the same headline. Mystery instructor submits 3 coaches in under a minute. Nobody had her name yet. Nobody had her name yet. In a quiet kitchen 1,000 miles away, a retired Army sergeant major watched it twice, set the phone down, and started to laugh from somewhere deep in his chest. "I'd know those hips anywhere," he said to an empty room. "Brooks, hot damn, she's back." And then, the way these things go now, it flipped. By Sunday morning, Chase Whitlock had a lawyer, and the lawyer had a story. A civil suit and 3 criminal complaints. Assault and battery and reckless endangerment, describing Talia as an unstable employee with a history of violent outbursts who attacked 3 coaches without cause in front of 200 witnesses. 3 sworn affidavits, 1 each from the men on the mat. At 10:30, Logan posted a new cut of the footage, 22 seconds, and it opened on her hips, turning, and it ended on Chase screaming, "I tap," and the part where Chase grabbed her wrist and dragged her onto the mat was simply gone. The caption said, "Female instructor goes off on 3 coaches, charges pending." 14 million views by dinner. At noon, Preston posted an MRI of a torn rotator cuff, surgeries, career may be over, with a donation link, and money started pouring in. The internet decided overnight who the villain was. Hashtag demanding justice for Chase trended in a dozen states. A morning cable host put the edited clip on a loop and said the words clearly, some kind of untreated PTSD on live television. By Monday, the district attorney had filed 3 misdemeanor counts, and if they all stuck, Talia was looking at 18 months in county. Anonymous accounts dug up a fact that she'd been thrown out of the Army for hitting an officer, which was a clean lie that reached 4 million people before anyone caught it. Gloria's coworkers showed her the clip and asked her if she was scared of that woman, and Gloria left her shift early and didn't come back the next day. Hannah's parents called her at school, frightened, because they'd only seen the cut. A reporter started leaving cards under Talia's apartment door. Marcus called Monday morning, voice cracking, and suspended her pending the investigation. She closed her eyes and told him she understood, and then she told him to cancel her women's class. She'd call each of them herself. She sat at her kitchen table, with the unopened stack of VA paperwork on the counter and the footlocker across the room, and she called all 8 women one at a time and told each of them the class was paused, not gone, and that she was not leaving them. Then she opened the footlocker, took out the folded flag and the medal in its case, and the sealed envelope with her service record in it, set all 3 on the table, took one photograph, and sent it to Vera with 3 words. Authorize full release. Vera texted back inside 90 seconds. Confirmed. Filing in the morning. They have no idea what's coming. Across town, Vera Lindquist was working a 19-hour day. She'd filed a discovery motion at 4 a.m. for the original uncut stream, Vanguard's interior security footage, going back 90 days, every social post Chase had made in 5 years, Preston's full medical records, and a federal records request to the Department of the Army for the complete service file of Talia Brooks. She'd subpoenaed Logan's deleted drafts and his carrier logs. By Wednesday morning, she had all of it. The original stream, undated and uncut, with Chase's wrist grab plain as day at the 14-second mark. 3 security angles, showing the 46 minutes of Talia's body language before he ever touched her. 6 different posts, where Chase called himself a former Army Ranger with 3 combat tours, photos he'd lifted off stock military sites, Preston's MRI with its original file name and a scan date 3 years before showcase night, and 1 recovered text from Logan to Preston, sent at 11:47 the night of the event. "Bro, we have to sell the shoulder thing, or we're done." Vera printed everything in triplicate and color-coded the folders. Red for the lies, blue for the truth, gold for the record. Then she called Talia. "They built the whole thing on 3 lies," she said, "and every one of them breaks on the same morning. Pretrial hearing, Thursday, 9 o'clock. Bring the medal." Talia was quiet a while. Then she said there was a man in the gym. Second week, older, gray hair, came through with the sponsors and watched her too long, like he knew. Vera wrote it down. "I'll find him." Thursday morning, Talia Brooks walked through the metal detector at the county courthouse in a plain gray suit. No pins, no flag, just a steel watch and a manila envelope under her arm. Chase, Logan, and Preston sat at the plaintiff's table in suits that cost $2,000 apiece. Preston wore a sling he didn't need. The room was packed with reporters and sponsors, and 6 rows behind Talia sat her people. Gloria and Ruth and the night class women, Hannah in her sling, and 2 men she'd served with, and in the back row a gray-haired man with a small unit pin barely showing under his collar. Judge Marguerite Lowell called the room to order, and Vera Lindquist stood. "Your Honor, the case against my client rests on 3 claims: that she attacked the plaintiff without provocation, that the plaintiff's associate tore a rotator cuff in the incident, and that my client has a history of violence. All 3 are lies, and I'm going to prove it this morning." The judge nodded. "Proceed." Exhibit A, the original uncut stream, timestamp running, and at 14 seconds the whole room watched Chase's hand close on Talia's wrist and haul her onto the mat. His lawyer leaned in and whispered, and the smile dropped a notch. Exhibit B, Logan's recovered text, "The shoulder thing or we're done," up on the screen for everyone. And Preston went the color of paper while Logan stared at the floor. Exhibit C, Preston's MRI beside its own metadata. The scan dated 3 full years before the event, and a reporter in the second row said, "Oh my God," out loud. Exhibit D, Vera turned and faced the plaintiff's table. "Mr. Preston, Whitlock has marketed himself for 5 years as a former Army Ranger with 3 combat deployments. He has used that claim on podcasts, in interviews, in 43 sponsored posts, and to collect veteran-affiliated sponsorships, totaling just over $400,000. She lifted a folder. "This is the response from the Department of the Army and the National Personnel Records Center. There is no record of any individual matching Mr. Whitlock's name and date of birth ever enlisting in, serving in, or being discharged from any branch of the United States military." She lowered it. "That is a violation of federal law, Your Honor, and it will be referred to the United States Attorney at the close of this hearing." Chase's face had gone bone white. The room was dead silent. Vera wasn't done. She called Andre Whitfield, the quiet second coach who'd worked under Chase for 4 years and kept a notebook, and Andre sat down on the stand and said under oath that he'd heard Chase call Talia too weak for combat 7 times in 3 weeks, that it was harassment, that it was racial, that every one of them had been too scared of losing their spot to say a word, and that he was done being scared. Then Vera called her last witness, and the gray-haired man in the back row stood up. Command Sergeant Major Hollis Briggs, United States Army. Retired. 26 years. He paused. I ran the Combatives Master Trainer course at Fort Campbell. Talia Brooks trained the men who train Special Forces. She held the highest combative certification the Army awards. She is, with no exaggeration, one of the 3 most dangerous people I have ever stood next to in a uniform. 2 reporters got up. On a road in Jari district, her convoy hit a buried charge. The lead truck was on fire. 2 soldiers were already dead. 3 were trapped inside. She went into that fire with her own arm burning and pulled all 3 out. 2 of them are alive today. One of them, he nodded toward the 4th row, is sitting right there. A man in row 4, early 30s, raised his hand, and the prosthetic showed under his cuff. She was awarded the Silver Star and the Purple Heart on her battalion commander's recommendation. The citation is public record. I brought a certified copy. He handed it to the bailiff, who handed it to the judge, who read it aloud for conspicuous gallantry at extraordinary risk to her own life, and the room did not make a sound. Chase Whitlock was crying. Preston was looking at his shoes. Logan hadn't lifted his head in 4 minutes. So let me ask you the thing I told you we'd come back to. This man stole a soldier's honor, lied about her for years to make money off it, hurt a 19-year-old kid, and got caught dead to rights on every single count. What would you give him? Say it in the comments. I read all of them. Vera turned. Your Honor, with the court's permission, my client would like to say one thing. Granted. Talia stood, walked to the stand without notes and without the medal, and the judge asked if she wished to address the court. She looked at Chase for one long second. Then she looked at Hannah. Then she looked at Judge Lowell, and 3 rough, clear words came out. I chose restraint. Judge Lowell closed her folder. All charges against Ms. Brooks dismissed with prejudice. Mr. Whitlock, Mr. Pruitt, Bandermere, remanded for evidentiary review. The stolen valor and conspiracy matters referred to the United States Attorney by close of business. The gavel came down. Talia walked out, and behind her 3 men in expensive suits sat at a table that had become the wreckage of their own design. It came down like dominoes after that. Federal charges under the Stolen Valor Act, plus state counts for perjury and conspiracy. Every sponsor cut Chase loose inside a week, and the veteran brands demanded their $400,000 back. The league pulled his credential and put out a statement. He pleaded out to supervise release, restitution, and a permanent ban from ever holding an instructor certification again, and last anyone heard he was working nights at a distribution warehouse. Logan flipped on the others for a reduced sentence and 400 hours teaching at-risk teenagers. A placement chosen on purpose, so we have to look every week at the kind of kid whose pain he used to sell. Preston's family wrote a quiet 7-figure check straight to Talia to keep his name out of the rest of it. And then he moved to Arizona and disappeared. Marcus Doyle stood at a small podium in the rain 3 weeks later with no notes and said he'd built that gym for 31 years and let it rot into something he was ashamed of, that he'd failed Talia Brooks and Hannah Yee and every woman who'd walked in looking for somewhere safe, and that he was getting out of the business. He sold Vanguard. He sold it to Talia. She paid $1. She took the old name off the front and put up a new one in plain white letters, 2 words, hold fast, which is a thing soldiers and sailors say, and which had come to mean, in her unit, I have every reason in the world to break, and I'm choosing not to. She used the settlement to make every class free for women veterans, for survivors, for anyone who walked in with a referral from a shelter or a VA caseworker. The night class became the everyday class. Hannah Yee, shoulder-healed inside 6 months, became her first assistant and taught beginner grappling on Saturday mornings to a room of 15 women, half of whom cried at least once their first day, and all of whom kept showing up. Gloria taught a class she called Loud, about taking up space, on Wednesdays. Ruth taught ground recovery on Tuesdays the way the Coast Guard taught her. The night class women became the staff. The hashtag became something bigger than a hashtag. A bill went through the state legislature requiring background checks and injury reporting and disclosure of conduct complaints for every certified martial arts instructor in the state, and people started calling it the Brooks Rule, and the governor signed it standing 2 feet in front of Talia, who didn't say a word at the ceremony, and didn't need to. A year on, Hold Fast opens at 6 in the morning. The lights come up slow on blue mats, worn soft in the right places, and there's not a single poster of anybody on the columns. There's one small framed photograph over the front desk, 3 men with smoke behind them, all of them alive. On a Tuesday, she teaches 12 beginners, half of them veterans, 2 of them mothers whose daughters got hurt in places that were supposed to be safe. After class, a young woman stays back to roll the mats, 22, just out of the army, 3 weeks in the door, and she hasn't told anyone why yet. She looks at the scar on Talia's forearm and finally asks where it came from. Talia doesn't flinch. She lifts her good hand and taps her chest twice, the old sign her unit used that just means still here, and then she uses her voice, rough and clear and steady from a year of building the muscle back up. "Fire!" she says. "And the people I went into it for?" The young woman nods, doesn't speak, sits down on the mat beside her, and they roll the rest of them together in the quiet, and on a shelf in the office behind them sit 2 things side by side. A silver star no longer face down, and a retired body camera with a small square black tape over the lens. 2 tools, one for surviving and one for proof, both of them still in service in their own way. I told you all of this because I have watched the world make up its mind about a woman before she ever opened her mouth, and I wanted you to see how that sentence ends. If somebody in your life got written off the way Talia got written off on day 1, a coworker, a neighbor, the quiet person at your gym, tell me their name down below. I read every one. Send this to one person who's ever been told they were too weak for the room they were standing in. And if you're a veteran watching this, we see you, and we're still building the world that deserves what you carried. The mats are rolled. The lights go down. The doors open again. Tomorrow at 6. What stays with me is how long Talia Brooks stayed still. 3 weeks of being kicked at, filmed, called a charity case, and she answered almost none of it out loud. People mistake that for weakness. I used to, myself. But watching the way it ended, I understood that her silence wasn't her hiding. It was her choosing. Every cruel thing Chase Whitlock said, she filed it, dated it, and let it sit there gathering weight, because she knew something he didn't, that a man who feels safe enough to be cruel on camera is a man writing his own confession. That's the part I keep coming back to. Chase didn't lose because Talia was the better fighter, though she was. He lost because of what he'd let himself become long before she walked through that door. He built a life on a lie about who he was, and lies like that don't hold weight. When the pressure finally came, the whole thing folded the same way his arm did, all at once, with nowhere left to hide. He earned that. Not in some cosmic sense, just in the plain arithmetic of it. He spent years cutting corners on the truth, and one morning the bill came due in front of 41,000 people. And here's what I want my own kids to take from a story like this. It isn't enough to be tough. Chase was tough. Toughness without a spine of honesty underneath it is just a louder way to fall. What carried Talia wasn't her hands. It was that she refused to lie even when lying would have been easier. Refused to swing when swinging would have felt good. Refused to quit on Gloria Mendez or Hannah Yee when walking away would have spared her the whole mess. She did the harder right thing 8 or 9 times in a row, quietly, when no one was clapping. She also thought, that matters as much as the rest. She didn't react. She planned. The body camera, the lawyer she kept in her phone for 4 years, the way she counted witnesses in that drunken circle instead of throwing the first punch she was entitled to throw. Patience like that isn't passive. It's the sharpest thing a person can do. And under all of it was the part nobody saw. The 4 years of paperwork and rejection and a medal she couldn't bear to look at, where she got up every single day anyway. That stubborn refusal to break is the soil the rest grows in. You can't think clearly or act decently if you've already quit on yourself. So when somebody tells you that you're too weak, too broken, too quiet for the room you're standing in, remember Talia on the side mat, sleeves down, breathing slow. Stay honest, stay smart, and do not, under any circumstances, count yourself out before the bell.